The night shift cleaning crew was finishing up when it happened. Margaret's purse tipped over, spilling its contents across the break room floor. The store manager bent to help and froze. There on the linoleum was a photograph. Margaret, 20 years younger, sitting in an F-16 cockpit. The flight suit, the patches on her arm, the call sign Phoenix printed on the helmet. Is this you?" The manager's voice shook. Margaret quickly gathered the photo, but it was too late. The secret she'd hidden for 2 decades was out. Margaret Chen had worked at the Safeway in Colorado Springs for 12 years. Every morning at 6 a.m. sharp, she'd arrive in her sensible sedan, tie her graying hair back in a neat ponytail, and take her position at Register 3. The customers knew her as the friendly cashier who always had a kind word, who remembered their names and asked about their grandchildren. No one suspected that Margaret Chen had once been Major Margaret Phoenix Chen, one of the Air Force's first female F-16 pilots. The morning after the photo incident started like any other. Margaret scanned groceries with practiced efficiency, making small talk with the early morning shoppers, mostly military families from the nearby Air Force bases. She'd chosen Colorado Springs deliberately when she'd disappeared 20 years ago. Hide in plain sight, close to what you know. The irony of scanning groceries for active-duty pilots who had no idea who she was had long since stopped amusing her. "Morning, Margaret," called Mrs. Henderson, a regular whose husband worked at Peterson Air Force Base. "Did you see the news about that F-16 that went down yesterday?" Margaret's hand stilled for just a moment on the cereal box she was scanning. "No, I hadn't heard." "Training accident, they're saying. Though my Herald says it doesn't add up. That pilot had over 2,000 hours. Mrs. Henderson leaned in conspiratorially. "Between you and me, I think there's more to it." Margaret forced a pleasant smile and continued scanning. She'd seen the news. She'd recognized the tail number. She knew exactly what had happened to that F-16, because she'd flown that exact aircraft hundreds of times. And Mrs. Henderson's husband was right. It didn't add up. 47 or 3, Margaret said, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her mind. As Mrs. Henderson left, Tom Bradley, the store manager, approached her register. He was in his 30s, earnest and well-meaning, hired 5 years after Margaret had started. He'd been acting strange since the previous night's incident with the photo. "Margaret, could I see you in my office when you get a break?" She nodded, knowing this conversation was inevitable. 20 years of anonymity shattered by a tipped purse and an old photograph she should have destroyed long ago. An hour later, she sat across from Tom in his cramped office, surrounded by work schedules and vendor invoices. He fidgeted with a pen, clearly uncomfortable. "So, about last night," he began. "It was a long time ago," Margaret said simply. "You were a fighter pilot?" The disbelief in his voice would have been insulting if she hadn't heard it so many times before. People saw a middle-aged Asian woman working a cash register and couldn't reconcile it with the image of someone who'd pushed F-16s to their limits. "Yes." Why are you here, working at Safeway?" Margaret considered her words carefully. The truth was classified, complicated, and dangerous. "I retired. Wanted something simple." Tom clearly wanted to ask more, but Margaret's expression discouraged further questions. He nodded slowly. "Well, your secret's safe with me. I haven't told anyone." But secrets, Margaret knew, had a way of spreading like wildfire, especially in a military town. The next few days passed with an undercurrent of tension. Margaret caught Tom watching her with poorly concealed fascination. Some of the younger employees whispered when she passed. The photo had been seen by 3 people that night: Tom, Janet from the deli counter, and Marcus, the night janitor. In a town where everyone had connections to the military, it was only a matter of time. That time came on a Thursday afternoon. Margaret was restocking the candy display near her register when she heard a voice that made her blood run cold. Phoenix? Phoenix Chen? She turned slowly. Standing there in civilian clothes was Colonel James Stryker Morrison, her former wing commander. His hair was gray now, his face lined with 20 more years of service, but his eyes were sharp as ever. "I'm sorry, you must be mistaken," Margaret said, her voice steady even as her heart raced. Morrison studied her face intently. "My God, it really is you. We thought you were dead." "Sir, I think you have me confused with someone else. I'm Margaret Chen. I work here." "Cut the crap, Major." His voice dropped low. "I'd recognize you anywhere. You saved my life over Baghdad. No one else could have made that shot." Margaret glanced around. The store wasn't busy, but there were enough customers to make this dangerous. "Sir, please, not here." Morrison's expression softened slightly. "Where then? We need to talk." She thought quickly. Running wasn't an option. He'd found her once. He could find her again. And part of her, the part she'd buried for 20 years, wanted to know why he was here. "I get off at 4. There's a coffee shop on Tejon Street, the Wild Goose. I'll meet you there." He nodded. "Phoenix—" "Margaret," she corrected firmly. "Major Chen died 20 years ago." Morrison's face showed he understood more than she'd said. 4 o'clock. Don't make me come looking for you again." After he left, Margaret's hand shook as she tried to continue working. Janet from the deli counter approached, concern on her face. "You okay, honey? That man bothering you?" "Old acquaintance," Margaret managed. "From before." Janet's eyes widened with understanding. Since the photo incident, the store's gossip mill had been working overtime. "From when you were—" Margaret just nodded, not trusting her voice. The rest of her shift crawled by. Every time the automatic doors opened, she tensed. What if Morrison had reported seeing her? What if others came? The life she'd carefully built, boring and anonymous, was crumbling around her. At 3:55, she clocked out and drove to the Wild Goose. Morrison was already there, sitting in a back corner booth with clear sight lines to all entrances. Old habits. She slid in across from him, and for a moment they just looked at each other. 20 years was a long time. "You look good for a dead woman," Morrison finally said. "You look old for a colonel," she shot back, and for a moment it was like they were back in the ready room, trading barbs before a mission. His smile faded. "What happened, Phoenix? One day you're our best pilot, the next you're gone. Crash site in the mountains, no body recovered. We held a memorial service." Margaret stared at her coffee. "It's complicated." "I've got time." She was quiet for so long, Morrison probably thought she wouldn't answer. Finally she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Operation Nightshade. You remember it?" Morrison's face went pale. "That's classified so far above. Phoenix, what did you do?" "I did my job. Flew the mission, delivered the payload. It wasn't until later I found out what we'd really done." She met his eyes. 17 civilians, Jim. Kids. The intel was wrong. The target was a school, not a weapons depot." "Christ." Morrison ran a hand through his gray hair. "But that doesn't explain." "I asked questions. Wrong questions to the wrong people. Started documenting discrepancies in the mission reports." Margaret's voice was bitter. "Turns out, some very powerful people knew exactly what that target was. They needed it destroyed, needed someone to blame. Foreign terrorists, they said. Except I had gun camera footage that proved otherwise. So, they made you disappear." "They tried to make me actually disappear. Brake lines cut, suspicious engine failure over the mountains. I ejected, but instead of activating my beacon," she shrugged, "I walked out. Let them think I died. A handler helped me create a new identity, and I've been Margaret Chen, cashier, ever since." Morrison was quiet for a long moment. "The footage? Safe, insurance policy. As long as I stay dead, it stays buried." "And if someone finds you?" Margaret's smile was cold. "Then some very important people have a very bad day." They sat in silence, the weight of shared secrets heavy between them. Finally, Morrison leaned forward. "Phoenix, I need to tell you why I'm really here. It wasn't coincidence. I've been looking for you." Margaret tensed. "Jim, if you're here to—" "I'm here because we need you." He pulled out his phone, showed her a classified briefing. 3 F-16s down in the last month. All experienced pilots. All flying missions near the same sector where Nightshade happened. Mechanical failures? That's the official story. But the flight data shows something else. Someone's using a new weapons system. Something that can take control of our aircraft remotely. He paused. The signatures match theoretical work from Nightshade's black projects. Margaret felt cold despite the warm coffee shop. "You think someone from the program is cleaning house? Everyone connected to Nightshade has had accidents in the last year. You're one of the last witnesses left alive." Morrison leaned back. "Whether you wanted it or not, Phoenix, you're back in the game." Margaret stared at the briefing on Morrison's phone. 3 aircraft down, 3 pilots dead, all connected to a mission she'd tried to forget for 20 years. "I'm not a pilot anymore," she said quietly. "I'm a cashier. I scan groceries and make small talk. I haven't flown in—" "Bullshit." Morrison's voice was sharp. "You think I didn't check before I came here? You rent time at the civilian flight school every month. Small planes, nothing military, but you're still flying. Still sharp." Margaret's facade cracked slightly. He was right, of course. She couldn't give up flying entirely, even if it was just Cessnas instead of F-16s. "What do you want from me?" "Intel. Help us understand what you saw during Nightshade. Who was involved? What systems they were testing." He paused. "And maybe, if things go south, someone who can fly like you used to." "I can't. You don't understand. The moment I surface, I'm dead. Really dead this time." "You're dead anyway if we don't stop this. They're eliminating everyone who knows about Nightshade. How long before they track down Margaret Chen and her convenient backstory?" As if to underscore his point, Margaret's personal phone buzzed. Unknown number. She never got unknown callers. She answered cautiously. "Hello?" Silence. Then, "Hello, Phoenix? It's been a long time." The voice was electronically distorted, but something about the cadence was familiar. Margaret's blood ran cold. "Who is this?" "Someone who knows Margaret Chen was born the same day Phoenix Chen died. Someone who's been watching, waiting." A pause. "Check your apartment, Phoenix. I left you a gift." The line went dead. Morrison was already standing. "We need to move, now." But Margaret was frozen, her mind racing. Her apartment. Her safe, anonymous apartment where she'd lived quietly for 12 years. If they'd found that— "Phoenix!" Morrison's sharp voice cut through her paralysis. "Move, Major! That's an order!" Training kicked in. She stood, grabbed her purse, followed Morrison out of the coffee shop. His rental car was parked right outside. Of course, he'd planned for quick extraction. "My place is 10 minutes away," she said as they pulled out. "We're not going to your place. If they've been there, it's compromised." Morrison drove with professional skill, checking mirrors, varying speed. "We're going to Peterson. Still have friends there." "I can't go on base. Margaret Chen doesn't have clearance." "Margaret Chen is about to stop existing," Morrison said grimly. "One way or another." As they drove toward the Air Force Base, Margaret's phone rang again. This time it was Tom from the store. "Margaret, thank God. Don't come back here. Some men came looking for you. Military types, but wrong. They had guns. Tom, are you okay? Yeah, they just asked questions and left. But Margaret, they knew about the photo. They knew you were a pilot. She closed her eyes. 20 years of careful anonymity, destroyed in a week. Thanks for the warning, Tom. I won't be coming back. Margaret, what's going on? Are you in trouble? Take care of yourself, Tom. She hung up before he could respond. Morrison glanced at her. The store. Compromised. They know. He cursed under his breath and accelerated. As they approached Peterson Air Force Base, Margaret saw the familiar checkpoints, the guards, the aircraft in the distance. For 20 years she'd driven past this base, forcing herself not to look too closely, not to remember who she'd been. Now she was going back inside. But as whom? Margaret Chen, the cashier who was about to disappear? Or Phoenix Chen, the pilot who'd never really died? Morrison's credentials got them through the main gate, though Margaret noticed the guard's scrutiny of her civilian ID. They drove deep into the base, past buildings she remembered and new ones she didn't, finally stopping at a nondescript office complex. Stryker, what is this place? She asked as they got out. Officially, personnel resources. Unofficially, where we handle delicate situations. He led her inside, past minimal security, into a conference room that screamed SIF, Sensitive Compartmented Information Facility. Soundproof, electronically shielded, secure. 3 people waited inside. Margaret recognized one immediately, General Patricia Hayes, who'd been a colonel when Margaret died. The years had been kind to her, steel-gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. The other 2 were younger, a captain and a civilian analyst by their bearing. My God, Hayes said softly. Phoenix Chen, I never believed you were dead. Ma'am, Margaret responded automatically, muscle memory of military courtesy still strong. Sit, Hayes commanded. We have a lot to cover and not much time. The analyst, introduced as Dr. Sarah Kim, pulled up classified files on the wall display. Margaret saw her own face from 20 years ago, mission briefs, aircraft tail numbers. Let me be direct, Hayes began. In the last 6 months, we've lost 7 pilots. All flew missions connected to Operation Nightshade. All died in accidents that our investigation shows were anything but. Jim mentioned 3. 3 this month. 7 total. Hayes pulled up more files. Every one of them had questioned orders during Nightshade. Everyone had filed reports about civilian casualties. Margaret studied the faces. She knew some of them. Good pilots, ethical officers, dead. Someone's cleaning house, she said. Someone with access to classified systems and experimental weapons, Dr. Kim added. Major Chen, what do you know about Project Prometheus? Margaret's breath caught. That was theoretical. Remote aircraft override, electromagnetic pulse weapons, AI-assisted targeting. We tested components during Nightshade, but full implementation was years away. Hayes emphasized. Someone finished the work. Someone who's now using it to eliminate witnesses. The captain, identified as Rogers, spoke up. We've tracked suspicious communications to a private military contractor, Spectre Solutions. Ring any bells? Margaret closed her eyes. Oh yes, it rang bells. General William Thorne. He ran the Black Projects Division during Nightshade. I heard he went private sector after retiring. With a client list that includes several countries who'd love to embarrass the U.S. by exposing Nightshade, Hayes said. We think he's selling silence, eliminating anyone who could testify about war crimes in exchange for contracts. So arrest him, Margaret said. With what evidence? Officially, Nightshade never existed. The pilots died in accidents. You're dead. The gun camera footage you mentioned is in a safety deposit box in Denver, Margaret finished, along with mission recordings, communications intercepts, and my own testimony recorded the day before my death." The room went very quiet. "You've had proof this whole time?" Morrison's voice was strained. "Insurance. As long as I stayed dead, stayed quiet, it stayed buried. That was the deal." Margaret met their eyes steadily. "But if pilots are dying—" "We need that evidence," Hayes said. "But more than that, we need you. You're the only pilot left who flew the critical Nightshade missions and lived." What exactly are you asking?" Hayes exchanged glances with the others. "Thorne's planning something big. Intelligence suggests he's going to demonstrate Prometheus's capabilities by taking down a high-profile target. We don't know what, but it's soon. And we need someone who can fly against Prometheus, someone who knows the system's theoretical weaknesses because they helped test it." Hayes leaned forward. "We need Phoenix." Margaret laughed bitterly. "I'm 52 years old. I haven't flown anything tactical in 20 years. You have younger pilots who don't know Prometheus, who didn't help design the countermeasures that were never implemented." Morrison interjected. "Phoenix, you wrote the book on defeating this system. Literally. Your report on vulnerabilities was classified and buried," Margaret finished. "But you remember it." She did. Every detail. Every weakness she'd identified in the system that could take control of an aircraft remotely. The kill switches that should have been installed but weren't because they were too expensive. "Even if I could still fly, and that's a big if, I'm dead, remember? Phoenix Chen doesn't exist." "Actually," Dr. Kim pulled up another file, "she's about to be miraculously found. Survived the crash, amnesia, living under an assumed name. Tragic story, but intelligence community loves a good resurrection." "And Margaret Chen?" "Dies in a car accident tonight. Tragic. Single vehicle. No witnesses." Margaret felt the walls of her carefully constructed life closing in. But those pilots' faces stared at her from the display. 7 good officers dead because they tried to do the right thing 20 years ago. "I'll need time to prepare. Physical conditioning, simulator time." "You have 72 hours, Hayes said. "Intelligence says Thorne's demonstration is this weekend." 3 days? That's impossible." "That's what you said about landing an F-16 with no hydraulics and half a wing," Morrison reminded her. "Yet you did it." Margaret stood, pacing to the window. Outside she could see the flight line, F-16 sitting ready. For 20 years she'd forced herself not to want this. Now they were offering it back. But at what cost? "If I do this, when it's over I want out, really out. New identity, new life. Somewhere Thorne and his people will never find me." "Done," Hayes agreed immediately. "Do this, and we'll make you disappear so completely, even we won't be able to find you." Margaret turned back to face them. "Then I guess Phoenix is back from the dead." The pre-dawn darkness at Peterson Air Force Base was broken by the harsh lights of the flight line. Margaret stood beside her assigned F-16, running through pre-flight checks with meticulous care. The aircraft was a Block 50 model, far more advanced than anything she'd flown before, but the fundamentals remained unchanged. "Phoenix, this is Tower. Weather window is optimal. You are cleared for engine start." Margaret climbed into the cockpit, muscle memory guiding her through procedures she hadn't performed in 2 decades. The seat felt different. She was older, her body changed by years of civilian life. But as the engines spun up, as the familiar vibration coursed through the airframe, Phoenix Chen awakened fully. "Tower, Phoenix. Engines start complete. Systems nominal." In the command center, General Hayes watched the feeds alongside Morrison and the tactical team. The president's aircraft was already airborne, following its published flight plan. Somewhere out there, Thorne was preparing to demonstrate his stolen technology to the world. "Phoenix, be advised. AWACS reports no unusual activity in your sector. Maintain heading 270, Angels 35. Copy tower, 270, flight level 350. Margaret guided the F-16 into the dawn sky, the Colorado mountains falling away beneath her. For a moment, she allowed herself to simply feel it. The power, the freedom, the perfect fusion of human and machine that had once defined her existence. At 38,000 feet, her instruments flickered. Dark Star Phoenix, experiencing electronic anomalies. Phoenix Dark Star, we're seeing it too. Signature intensifying. The radio cut to static. Every display in Margaret's cockpit went dark simultaneously, then rebooted with foreign codes streaming across the screens. Prometheus had found her. Hello, Phoenix? The voice came through her helmet speakers, clear despite the jammed radios. General William Thorne, sounding exactly as he had 20 years ago. I wondered if they'd be desperate enough to resurrect you, Thorne continued. The ghost pilot, back from the dead. How poetic. Margaret fought her controls as the F-16 began responding to external commands. The stick moved under her hands, banking the aircraft east toward Air Force One's flight path. You won't succeed, Thorne, she said, knowing he could hear her. I know this system. I know its weaknesses. The system you knew was version 1.0. This is Prometheus 3.0, Major, improved by 20 years of development and unlimited funding from grateful clients. Her aircraft's weapons systems activated without her input. The radar locked onto a distant target, Air Force One, still 200 miles away, but closing. Margaret activated Kim's countermeasure device. For a moment, her displays flickered back to normal. She grabbed the stick, yanking the F-16 into a violent barrel roll, trying to break Prometheus's lock. Impressive, Thorne commented as her aircraft fought between two masters. But futile. In 60 seconds, your missiles will launch automatically. The President's aircraft will be destroyed, and the world will see that no one is beyond reach. My buyers will be very pleased. You're forgetting something, General, Margaret said through gritted teeth as she fought the controls. Oh, I didn't just study Prometheus's weaknesses. I built in a back door, something you never found because you were too arrogant to believe a mere major could outsmart you. She input a sequence on her keypad, codes she'd memorized 20 years ago and never forgotten. Her displays flashed, error messages cascading as 2 decades-old safeguards activated. What are you doing? For the first time, Thorne sounded uncertain. Something I should have done 20 years ago. Shutting you down. The back door was simple, a kill switch that would broadcast Prometheus's shutdown codes on all frequencies. But it came with a cost. The electromagnetic pulse required to transmit it would fry every electronic system within 50 miles, including her own aircraft. You'll die, Thorne stated flatly. I died 20 years ago, remember? This is just making it official. She armed the device. 50 miles away, Air Force One continued on course, oblivious to the drama playing out at 40,000 feet. In her cockpit, warning lights flashed as Prometheus tried to regain control. 30 seconds to missile launch, Thorne announced. You can't stop it, Phoenix. Accept your failure. Margaret smiled grimly. You know what the problem is with men like you, General. You always underestimate women like me. She activated the kill switch. The electromagnetic pulse burst from her aircraft like an invisible nova. Every electronic system within 50 miles went dark, including Prometheus, including her F-16, including the dozen civilian aircraft that suddenly found themselves flying by stick and rudder alone. Margaret's engines flamed out instantly. The F-16, now a very expensive glider, began its inevitable descent. She had maybe 3 minutes before impact. Phoenix, this is Dark Star. Do you copy? The hardened military radios recovered first, crackling back to life. Dark Star Phoenix, Prometheus is neutralized. Air Force One is safe. I'm going down. Phoenix, punch out! Eject! She reached for the ejection handles, then stopped. Below her were the Colorado mountains where Phoenix Chen had died the first time. There was poetry in it ending here. "Negative, Darkstar. I'm done running." "Margaret," Morrison's voice cut through on the emergency channel. "Don't do this. Tell Hayes the back door worked. Tell her Nightshade's ghosts can rest now." She watched the altimeter unwind. "And Jim? Thanks for finding me, for giving me the chance to make it right. Phoenix,